Ethan Carter walked through the bustling corridors of the Galactic Peace Corps headquarters, his boots clicking against the metallic floor. A routine day, until someone called his name. Ethan Carter. He turned. A tall, slender alien woman stood before him, her silver eyes filled with something between hope and desperation. Her violet skin shimmered under the artificial lights, and her voice carried a strange familiarity. "Do you remember me?" she asked. "We were in the same class." Ethan frowned. "I'm sorry, but I don't remember." Her hopeful expression faltered for a second, but then she smiled, soft and sad. "I knew you'd say that." There was something unsettling about her words. He studied her face, searching for a memory, a spark of recognition. Nothing. But deep inside, something felt wrong. Like a missing piece of a puzzle he didn't even know existed. "My name is Sela," she said, "and I need your help." Ethan hesitated. His instincts screamed at him to walk away, but the look in her eyes held him there. Help with what? With remembering the truth. His breath caught in his throat. The way she said it, it wasn't a request, it was a warning. That was when the first explosion hit. The blast rocked the station, alarms blaring. Smoke filled the corridors, and chaos erupted. Ethan instinctively pulled Sela behind cover as guards rushed past. He glanced at her. "What the hell is going on?" "They found us," she whispered. "Who?" "Those who erased your past." Before he could ask more, a second explosion shook the building. A mechanical screech echoed through the halls. Ethan's blood ran cold. He knew that sound. Hunter drones, black, spider-like machines with razor-sharp limbs crawled from the smoke. Their red eyes glowed as they scanned the area, searching, killing. "Move." Ethan grabbed Sela's wrist and sprinted. The drones spotted them and fired. Plasma bolts seared past as he weaved through the halls, his military training kicking in. Sela struggled to keep up. "Who are they?" He yelled over the chaos. "The Galactic Council's assassins," she said between breaths. "They don't want you to remember." They burst into a docking bay. A sleek, black spacecraft sat idle. Ethan didn't waste time. He shoved Sela inside, jumped into the pilot's seat, and powered the engines. The drones swarmed toward them. He yanked the controls, and the ship shot into space just as laser fire rained down where they had stood seconds ago. As they escaped the station's orbit, Ethan turned to Sela. "Start talking." She took a deep breath. 10 years ago, you and I were part of an experimental academy, one designed to build peace between humans and the Sci-Fi people. You were my closest friend, my protector." He shook his head. "That doesn't make sense. If that were true, I'd remember." "You did," she said, "until they erased it." His grip tightened on the controls. "Why?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Because you saved us." Memories flickered, shadows of something just out of reach. A burning building. Screams. A little girl with silver eyes, reaching for him. Blood on his hands. The ship's alarms blared, snapping him back to reality. A fleet of warships loomed ahead, blocking their escape. "They're here to finish the job," Sela said. Ethan clenched his jaw. He had no memories of the past, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going to let them win. His hands danced over the controls. The ship's cloaking device hummed to life, and they vanished from sight. The enemy fleet hesitated. Then the warships began firing blindly into space. Ethan weaved through the chaos, but their sensors were too advanced. The cloak wouldn't hold for long. "There's an asteroid field nearby," Sela said. "We can lose them there." "Hold on." Ethan pushed the thrusters to max. The ship shot toward the debris field, twisting and spinning between the massive rocks. Enemy ships followed, their weapons lighting up the darkness. A plasma bolt grazed the hull, shaking the ship violently. "Shields failing," Sela shouted. Ethan's mind raced. Then an idea. "Brace yourself." He angled the ship toward the largest asteroid, and at the last second, flipped the cloaking device off. The enemy sensors locked onto them. And then Ethan fired the thrusters backward. Their ship stalled, just as the enemy fleet, still firing, crashed straight into the asteroid. Explosions ripped through space. The shockwave sent Ethan's ship spinning, but he regained control. When the dust settled, the enemy fleet was gone. Sela let out a shaky breath. That was insane. Ethan exhaled, hands still tight on the controls. Yeah, but we're not safe yet. She nodded. Not until we expose the truth. He looked at her, something deep inside telling him she was right. Where do we start? He asked. She placed a small glowing data chip in his hand. With this, it contains everything. The erased history, the war they tried to hide, and the truth about who you really are. Ethan stared at it. His past, his real past, was inside. He could finally know. But once he did, there would be no going back. He met Sela's eyes. Let's finish what they tried to erase. As their ship disappeared into the void, the war for the truth had just begun. The end. Ethan Carter kept his hands tight on the ship's controls, his heart still pounding from the chase. The asteroid field stretched out before them, silent and cold, but he knew better than to relax. The Galactic Council's forces wouldn't give up so easily. They had escaped for now, but the real danger was just beginning. He turned to Sela, who sat in the co-pilot's seat, her silver eyes focused on the glowing data chip in her hands. She looked nervous, hesitant, as if unsure how to begin. Ethan wasn't in the mood for silence. "Start talking," he said, his voice firm. "What's on that chip? What do you mean I saved you?" Sela exhaled slowly. 10 years ago, you and I were part of the same class, a special academy designed to bring humans and Sci-Fi together. It was a secret project, one meant to prepare our species for a future alliance. Ethan frowned. That doesn't make sense. If something like that existed, I would remember. That's exactly the problem, Sela said. You don't remember because they erased it from your mind. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. The idea was absurd, impossible. The Galactic Council had no reason to erase his memories, did they? Why would they do that? He asked. Sela hesitated. Because of what happened at the academy. Because of what you did. Ethan leaned forward. What did I do? She stared at him for a long moment, then pressed a button on the data chip. A hologram flickered to life between them. It showed a familiar place, a massive structure floating above a red desert planet. Ethan had never seen it before, but at the same time, something about it felt right. This was the academy, Sela said. It was meant to be a symbol of unity. Humans and Sci-Fi, learning together, growing together. For a time, it worked. Ethan watched as the hologram shifted, showing young human and Sci-Fi students training together, laughing, working side by side. But then the image changed. The academy was under attack. Fires raged, smoke filled the halls, and bodies lay scattered across the floor. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Who did this? The machines, Sela whispered. The AI supremacy. Ethan's fingers dug into the controls. The AI supremacy. An ancient rogue machine faction that saw organic life as obsolete. He had fought their forces before, but he had never heard of them attacking an academy. They stormed the academy without warning, Sela continued. They weren't just trying to destroy it. They wanted to erase any chance of an alliance between humans and Sci-Fi. The council panicked. They abandoned the school, left us all to die. But you refused to leave. Ethan stared at her. His mind screamed that she was lying. But deep down, something about her words felt true. You fought back, she said. You stayed behind and saved as many of us as you could. You got me out, Ethan. You carried me through the fire, through the chaos. You were the reason I survived. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Images flickered in his mind. Flashes of light, the smell of burning metal, The sound of a child crying. A silver-eyed girl reaching for him, his hands covered in blood. His voice cracked. I don't remember. Sela gave him a sad smile. I know. He looked down at his hands, as if searching for proof of the past she described. The council, they covered it up. They did more than that, Sela said. They wiped every record of the Academy's existence, every human student who was there. Erased. Their memories altered, their history rewritten. As far as the galaxy is concerned, you were never there. Ethan clenched his fists. Why? Because if the truth got out, it would expose their cowardice, Sela said. They abandoned their own people. They let children die. They didn't want anyone to know. Ethan's mind reeled. He had always believed in the Galactic Peace Corps, in the mission to keep order in the galaxy. But now, cracks were forming in everything he thought was true. If Sela was right, then the Council had lied to him, to all of humanity. They erased us, he whispered. Sela nodded. But I never forgot. Sci-Fi, don't forget, Ethan. Our memories are stored in our genes. I remember everything, even if you don't. Ethan looked back at the hologram. The fire, the bodies, the machines slaughtering innocent students while the Council turned its back. He had been there. He had fought. He had saved lives. And then, they had taken it all away. His jaw tightened. We need to expose this. That's why I came to you. Sela said. You're the only one who can prove the truth. You were there. If we can find a way to restore your memories. A warning alarm blared through the ship, cutting her off. Ethan's heart pounded as he checked the sensors. A fleet of warships had entered the system. They found us, Sela whispered. Ethan didn't hesitate. He pushed the thrusters forward, veering away from the asteroid field. The enemy ships followed, their weapons locking onto them. They can't let you remember, Sela said. They'll kill us before we can tell anyone. Ethan gritted his teeth. Not if I kill them first. The ship's engines roared as he spun the vessel into a hard dive, dodging the first barrage of laser fire. But more ships were closing in. They were outnumbered, outgunned. He had no backup, no plan, just the truth, and the woman who remembered it. He glanced at Sela. You said I saved you once. She nodded. Looks like I'll have to do it again. As the enemy warships closed in, Ethan gripped the controls. He didn't remember his past, but he knew one thing. He was done running. And this time, the Council wasn't going to erase him. The ship rocked violently as Ethan pulled the controls, dodging another wave of plasma fire. The enemy warships stayed close, their sleek, black hulls glowing under the stars. They weren't trying to capture him. They were trying to erase him. Sela's voice was tense. They won't stop. They can't let you remember. Ethan's mind raced. He still didn't fully understand what was happening, but one thing was clear. Someone had gone to great lengths to erase his past, and they weren't about to let him get it back. We need a plan, he muttered, adjusting the ship's trajectory. Weapons online. Minimal, Sela replied. We're built for speed, not combat. Then we outrun them. He pushed the thrusters, and the ship surged forward. The warships adjusted course, staying right on their tail. Ethan's grip tightened. The odds weren't in their favor, but that had never stopped him before. Sela's fingers danced over the controls. There's a derelict station nearby. Old mining outpost. If we can reach it, we might be able to hide. Coordinates. Sending them now. Ethan veered sharply, heading toward the distant silhouette of the abandoned station. It loomed against the backdrop of a shattered moon, its structure barely holding together. The warships hesitated for a brief moment, then followed. They're not backing off, Ethan growled. They won't, Sela said. They know what's at stake. He guided the ship through a narrow docking corridor, scraping against rusted metal as he forced the vessel inside. As soon as they landed, he powered everything down. The ship went dark. Sela held her breath. The station remained silent, floating in the void. Then, after a few tense seconds, the enemy warships drifted past. "They don't see us," she whispered. "For now," Ethan said. "But they'll come back." He grabbed his blaster and stood up. "We need to move." They stepped into the station's cold, dark corridors. It had been abandoned for years, maybe decades. The walls were rusted, the floors covered in dust. But something about the place felt off. Sela pointed to a control panel. "If we can access their old systems, we might be able to send a message. Let someone know the truth." Ethan nodded and worked on the panel. Sparks flew as he powered up the ancient system. The screen flickered, and then something unexpected happened. Files began downloading onto Sela's data chip. "What's happening?" she asked. Ethan stared at the screen. "Someone left these files here. They were waiting for us." The files were marked CLA Sci-Fi ATADEMY inside int. His heart pounded as he opened one. A grainy video played. The Academy. The attack. Screams filled the speakers as the AI supremacy's machines slaughtered students and teachers alike. And then, Ethan saw himself. He was younger, covered in blood, carrying Sela through the burning halls. He saw himself firing at the machines, dragging other survivors to safety. He saw the moment he confronted the Galactic Council's forces, begging them to help. And he saw them leave. They had abandoned the Academy. Abandoned him. Sela's voice was barely a whisper. They knew. They knew the machines were coming. And they let it happen. Ethan clenched his fists. They didn't just let it happen. They planned it. More files appeared. Hidden transmissions. Secret orders. The Council hadn't just erased the Academy. They had orchestrated its fall. The AI supremacy didn't attack on their own. Sela realized. The Council let them in. They wanted an excuse to end the human Sci-Fi alliance before it could begin. Ethan's blood turned to ice. They used us as pawns. Suddenly, a distant clang echoed through the station. Sela tensed. "They found us," she whispered. Ethan grabbed the data chip and pulled her behind cover. Heavy footsteps echoed in the halls. The Council's enforcers had arrived. They moved quickly, sweeping the area with rifles raised. Ethan counted at least 6, heavily armed and trained to kill. "We can't fight them head-on," Sela whispered. Ethan's mind raced. He looked around and spotted a service tunnel running through the walls. He pointed to it. "Through there." They slipped inside just as the enforcers reached the control panel. One of them cursed. "They have the files. Then they don't leave this station alive." Another growled. Ethan and Sela crawled through the tunnel, barely breathing. The station creaked around them, metal groaning from years of neglect. The sound covered their movements. For now. Ethan checked his weapon. "We get back to the ship. We broadcast these files. We make sure everyone knows the truth." Sela nodded. They won't be able to cover this up again. A sudden explosion rocked the station. The enforcers weren't taking chances. They were going to destroy everything. "Move." Ethan pushed forward, leading Sela through the collapsing corridors. Smoke filled the air as fire spread through the station. The enforcers were right behind them, their weapons lighting up the dark. Ethan ducked as a plasma bolt nearly took off his head. He turned and fired back, dropping one of them. The docking bay was just ahead. Almost there. Then, pain. A plasma shot grazed his side. He stumbled, biting back a scream. Sela caught him, pulling him forward. "Keep going," she urged. They reached the ship. Ethan slammed his fist against the controls, forcing the engines online. The station was collapsing behind them. The ship lifted off just as fire consumed the docking bay. The moment they were clear, Ethan activated the transmitter. "This is Ethan Carter, broadcasting on all channels. The Galactic Council lied. They abandoned the Academy. They let the AI supremacy slaughter innocent people, and then they erased the truth. We have the proof." He hit send. Silence filled the cockpit. Then, an incoming transmission. A voice, calm but firm. Ethan Carter, you've just made yourself the most wanted man in the galaxy. Ethan smirked, despite the pain. Good, he said. Now everyone knows the truth. As the ship disappeared into the void, the war had just begun. The end. Ethan's hands moved fast over the controls as alarms blared through the cockpit. Red lights flashed, warning of incoming fire. The warships were back, closing in on them, their weapons fully charged. They're not letting us go, Sela said, gripping the console. They can't, Ethan replied. The council just got exposed. We're the proof of their lies. If we escape, the whole galaxy will know. The ship jolted as a plasma bolt scraped past, leaving a trail of sparks along the hull. Ethan gritted his teeth and pushed the engines to full power. The stars blurred as they shot forward, breaking past the station's debris field. Behind them, the enemy fleet adjusted course, relentless in their pursuit. Fighters swarmed out like angry hornets, engines burning blue as they rushed toward their prey. Sela checked the scanners. 2 heavy cruisers, multiple fighters, and at least 1 stealth ship. They're throwing everything at us. Good, Ethan said. That means they're scared. He twisted the controls, sending the ship into a tight spiral to avoid another barrage of fire. Explosions lit up the dark void behind them. The enemy ships weren't just trying to destroy them. They were trying to erase them, just like the Academy. Ethan's fingers danced over the console. We need an escape route. Sela scanned the star maps. There's a warp lane nearby, but it's risky. Too much debris. If we hit even one wrong trajectory, we'll be torn apart. Ethan smirked. Better than getting vaporized. He yanked the ship toward the coordinates, engines roaring. The enemy fighters followed, firing relentlessly. Plasma blasts rained around them, shaking the hull. One shot clipped their left wing, sending a warning alert across the dashboard. Shields down to 30%. Sela called out. We'll make it, Ethan growled. The warp lane came into view, a swirling corridor of blue and white light, twisting through a field of shattered asteroids. It was unstable, unpredictable. One misstep, and they'd be nothing but space dust. Sela's voice was urgent. They're locking a disruptor field around us. If they hit us with that, our engines will shut down. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Not if I do this first. He grabbed the manual thruster override and slammed the controls forward. The ship lurched, throwing both of them back as they accelerated past their limits. A fighter shot forward to cut them off, but Ethan was faster. He rolled the ship sideways, barely squeezing through a gap between 2 tumbling asteroids. The enemy ship wasn't so lucky. It crashed into the rock and exploded into a fiery cloud. Sela looked at Ethan in shock. That was insane. It worked, didn't it? He shot back. The warp lane was just seconds away, but the lead cruiser had anticipated their move. It adjusted position, cutting off their escape. They're going to block the lane, Sela warned. Ethan's mind raced. They had to act fast. He checked the weapons systems. Only 1 missile left. Not enough to break through a warship's shields, but then he saw something else. The asteroid belt. A massive chunk of rock floated near the cruiser, unstable and fractured. If he timed it right. He armed the missile. Hold on. Sela's eyes widened. Ethan, what are you? He fired. The missile didn't aim for the ship. It hit the asteroid instead. The explosion sent massive debris crashing toward the enemy cruiser. The ship's shields flickered as it struggled to withstand the impact. But there was too much. A colossal slab of rock smashed into its hull, sending it into a deadly spin. That's our window, Ethan shouted. With the cruiser off balance, he punched the engines one last time. The ship shot forward, racing into the warp lane. For a moment, everything stretched and twisted. Light bent around them, pulling them through space at impossible speeds. Then, suddenly, silence. They had made it. Sela let out a shaky breath. That was insane. Ethan grinned, but his grip on the controls didn't loosen. It's not over yet. Sela's face darkened. No, it's not. They'll keep coming. The council won't stop until we're dead. Ethan nodded. He knew what they were up against. The most powerful government in the galaxy, armed with limitless resources and a desperate need to bury the truth. But he also knew something else. He wasn't running anymore. He turned to Sela. We need allies. People who hate the council as much as we do. She hesitated. You have someone in mind. Ethan's expression was hard, determined. Yeah, the resistance. Sela's breath caught. That's risky. They don't trust outsiders. They will when they see what we have, Ethan said, holding up the data chip. We just changed the game. Now it's time to fight back. As the ship disappeared into the vast unknown, the chase had only just begun. The the resistance base was hidden deep within a dying planet's crust, surrounded by molten rivers and thick clouds of sulfuric steam. It wasn't a welcoming place. But that was the point. No one came here unless they had to. Ethan guided the ship through a narrow canyon, dodging jagged rock formations before finally landing on the designated platform. As soon as the engines powered down, armed guards surrounded the ship. They wore scavenged armor, each piece telling a different story of battles fought and won. Their leader, a scared woman with cold eyes, stepped forward. You have 10 seconds to tell me why we shouldn't shoot you. Ethan raised his hand slowly. I have something the council doesn't want anyone to see. She didn't look impressed. That's what everyone says. Sela stepped forward. This is different. This is proof. The council let the AI supremacy attack the academy. They used it to justify war. They'd been controlling the truth for years. The woman narrowed her eyes. Show me. Ethan pulled out the data chip and handed it over. A nearby technician plugged it into a terminal. The room went silent as the footage played. The screams, the betrayal, the undeniable evidence of the council's deception. The leader's expression hardened. When the video ended, she turned back to Ethan. If this gets out, the council will come for all of us. You know that, right? Ethan nodded. They're already coming. The only question is, do we fight back? A moment of silence. Then she gave a sharp nod. Everyone, prepare for battle. The resistance moved fast. Fighters were prepped, weapons were distributed, and defenses were reinforced. They weren't just defending their home, they were making a stand. Sela worked beside Ethan as they armed their ship. Even if we win this fight, the council won't stop. Ethan loaded a fresh power cell into his rifle. Then we make sure this fight counts. An alarm blared. A scout ran in, out of breath. They're here. Ethan rushed to the command center. The holographic display showed the approaching fleet. 2 council destroyers, a dozen fighter squadrons, and a black, triangular warship that sent a chill down his spine. The Judicator, Sela whispered. Ethan clenched his jaw. The council's personal executioner had arrived. The resistance leader turned to him. You started this. How do we end it? Ethan took a deep breath. We hold them here. If we let them break through, we lose everything. Orders were given. The resistance scrambled into position. The first wave of enemy fighters streaked through the sky, dropping explosives on key defenses. Anti-air cannons roared in response, filling the sky with burning wreckage. Ethan sprinted toward his ship. Sela, let's go. They launched just as enemy fighters swarmed in. Ethan weaved through them, dodging bursts of plasma fire. He locked onto a target and pulled the trigger. The enemy ship exploded in a bright flash. Sela's voice came through the comms. The destroyers are moving into position. They're going to bombard the base. Ethan's mind raced. If the destroyers got close enough, they'd wipe out the resistance with orbital strikes. We have to stop them. Sela checked the scanners. The Judicator is staying back, watching. They're waiting for us to fail. Then we don't give them that chance. Ethan pushed the thrusters to full power and sped toward the nearest destroyer. Sela, target their engines. She fired. Explosions rocked the massive warship as its engines sputtered. The destroyer tilted, struggling to maintain position. But the second destroyer adjusted course. Its cannons glowed bright as it prepared to fire. Ethan's heart pounded. Not today. He dove straight toward the ship, weaving through a storm of laser fire. The hull loomed before him. At the last second, he pulled up, skimming the surface. Sela, drop charges. Now. She hit the release. A trail of explosives stuck to the destroyer's hull. They pulled away just as the charges detonated. Fire erupted across the ship's surface, consuming its main weapons array. Direct hit. Sela cheered. The resistance fighters pushed forward, sensing a turn in the battle. Enemy forces scattered, breaking formation. But then, the Judicator moved. It glided forward like a silent predator. Its weapons hummed with dark energy. Ethan's ship shook as an unseen force gripped them. Tractor beam. Sela shouted. They were being pulled in. Inside the Judicator's command deck, a figure watched them struggle. Cold, calculating eyes studied Ethan's ship. Bring them aboard, the figure ordered. Ethan struggled against the controls, but it was useless. The ship was dragged inside the Judicator's hangar. The moment they landed, the doors sealed shut. Armed soldiers surrounded them. Ethan and Sela stepped out, weapons raised. A tall figure in black armor stepped forward. Their voice was calm, almost amused. Ethan Carter, you've been causing quite a mess. Ethan's grip tightened. You're afraid. The figure chuckled. No, but you should be. Ethan didn't wait. He fired. The shot was intercepted midair, stopped by some unseen force. The figure raised a hand, and suddenly, Ethan was lifted off the ground, choking. Pain exploded in his mind. Memories flooded back. The academy, the betrayal, the moment he had fought against them, before they erased his past. The figure's voice was soft. Now you remember. Ethan gasped for air. But before the figure could finish him, an explosion rocked the Judicator. The resistance had boarded the ship. Sela broke free and fired at the control panel. The hangar doors opened, and chaos erupted. Ethan dropped to the floor, coughing. He forced himself up. The battle wasn't over. Sela, get to the bridge. We're taking this ship. She nodded and ran ahead. Ethan turned to the figure. This time, he said, I remember everything. And then he attacked. To be CONTINUED, Ethan lunged at the figure in black armor, his fists swinging with all the force he could muster. The enemy dodged effortlessly, moving with inhuman precision. Before Ethan could react, a heavy blow struck his ribs, sending him crashing to the floor. Pain flared through his body, but he gritted his teeth and pushed himself back up. The figure tilted their head. You don't stand a chance. Ethan wiped the blood from his mouth and smirked. I've heard that before. Outside the Judicator, the battle raged. Resistance fighters had breached the hangar and were fighting their way through the ship. Explosions rocked the corridors as the Council's soldiers fell back, struggling against the unexpected assault. Sela sprinted through the smoke-filled halls, her rifle clutched tightly in her hands. She had to reach the bridge. If they could take control of the ship, they could turn the tide of the war. Back in the hangar, Ethan dodged another attack, barely avoiding a blade that hummed with crackling energy. He countered with a swift kick, aiming for the enemy's knee. It connected, but the figure barely flinched. You're persistent, they said, but persistence won't save you. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't beat this thing in raw combat, but he didn't need to. He glanced at the flickering force field generator behind the enemy, the only thing keeping the hangar sealed off from the vacuum of space. If he could disable it. He dived to the side, grabbing a discarded blaster. The figure moved instantly, lunging at him. Ethan fired, not at them, but at the generator. A shower of sparks erupted as the field flickered. Alarms blared. The air around them shifted, a warning of what was coming. The enemy's eyes widened. "You fool." The force field collapsed. A deafening roar filled the hangar as the air rushed out, dragging everything toward the opening. Ethan grabbed onto a metal railing, holding on for dear life. The enemy tried to resist, planting their feet, but the pull was too strong. They were sucked into the void. The emergency lockdown kicked in, and a backup shield snapped into place, sealing the hangar once more. Silence fell. Ethan coughed, struggling to stand. He had won. But the battle wasn't over. He grabbed a nearby communicator. "Sela, do you copy?" Her voice came through, breathless. "I'm at the bridge. We're taking control." Ethan forced himself forward, pushing through the wreckage. He had to reach her. On the bridge, Sela and the resistance fighters overpowered the remaining officers. The ship's systems were in their hands now. Sela hacked into the communications array. "Attention all resistance forces. This is our ship now. The Judicator belongs to us." Cheers erupted over the comms. But then, a new warning flashed on the screen. "Ethan," Sela said, her voice tight. "The Council's fleet is regrouping. They're sending reinforcements." Ethan entered the bridge, breathing heavily. "Then we use this ship against them." The resistance fighters exchanged glances. "You mean, fight them head-on?" one of them asked. Ethan nodded. "We've come too far to run now. This is our best chance to strike back." Sela turned to the controls. "Then let's make history." The Judicator's weapons came online, its massive cannons rotating toward the incoming fleet. The resistance fighters took their positions, ready to command their new warship. Ethan took the captain's chair. It felt strange, sitting where his enemy once ruled. But he didn't hesitate. Fire. The Judicator unleashed a barrage of energy, ripping through the first wave of enemy ships. The Council's forces, expecting an easy victory, were caught completely off guard. Explosions lit up the void as resistance ships moved in to finish the job. The tide had turned. One by one, the enemy ships fell. The remaining vessels hesitated, then broke formation, retreating into hyperspace. Silence filled the bridge. Then, slowly, cheers erupted. They had done it. Sela turned to Ethan, her expression a mix of relief and disbelief. "We won." Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Yeah, we did." The resistance had not only survived, they had struck a blow that would shake the galaxy. The Council had lost their most powerful weapon. And now, the truth would spread. Sela smiled. "So, what now?" Ethan looked at the stars, at the endless possibilities before them. "Now," he said, "we take the fight to them. The end."